fighting a war that we cannot win with guns. We cannot win with sticks and bottles and bricks.
In a world of corruption and injustice, the state of Mississippi viewed Hezekiah Watkins as a dangerous criminal.
All of the times that I was incarcerated, the worst was Parchman Prison.
He was 13 years old when they put him on death row. His crime was walking while black in the age of the Klan.
How were you treated by law enforcement?
I was beaten several times, left unconscious on the side of the road.
In 1961, Hezekiah Watkins walked into a whites-only bus station with pioneers who changed the course of history.
We were the Freedom Riders.
They confronted barriers of racism and cruelty that corrupted America from the start. The same nation that declared all men are created equal, kidnapped and enslaved people from Africa. Then the Klan terrorized freed slaves. And for generations, racist politicians banned African Americans from living with the white ruling class.
Well, they had grown up believing from the church, from society, from the law, that segregation was the way it should be. And I was going against it. I was a traitor.
Joan Mulholland joined Hezekiah Watkins on Mississippi's death row. Her journey started in North Carolina in America's first wave of sit-ins. Black and white activists sat together at segregated lunch counters, knowing that racist mobs would attack them, but they would not fight back.
What were you most afraid of, knowing that people would attack you?
I just really didn't do fear.
That's Joan in the middle. The mob poured sugar, mustard, and ketchup on their heads. The movement took off as newspapers spread this picture across the nation.
So right in that picture, we have the power of Gandhian nonviolence and the power of the press.
She joined the Freedom Riders in 1961 with Hezekiah Watkins. They rode on buses to defy segregation in bus stops through the South. To Anniston, Alabama, where one bus was firebombed and the passengers beaten. To Birmingham, where the riders were beaten. To Montgomery, where the riders were beaten again. On to Jackson, Mississippi, where Joan Mulholland and Hezekiah Watkins, the youngest Freedom Rider, wound up on death row.
It took over 400 arrests in a few months to get the Kennedys to enforce the Supreme Court decision that, from December of '60, but it worked in the end.
And then, waves of students took the freedom struggle to the most segregated city in the nation.
Well, Birmingham was chosen for its hatred. It was known as the city that loves to hate.
Alabama's new governor, George Wallace, ran on defending segregation.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
And Birmingham's racist police boss conspired with the Klan to enforce it.
You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
Bull Connor was the perfect model. He didn't know it at the time, but he was the perfect model for our campaign.
Jeff Drew grew up in an African-American neighborhood called Dynamite Hill. They called it Dynamite Hill because the Klan kept bombing the homes.
And we could feel the effects of the blast through the rock, and it would actually lift us off the floor.
When Jeff was a kid, they built this stone wall around their house to protect against bullets and bombs. And in 1963, they invited a secret house guest to live with them.
But we had 2 beds in my bedroom, and I'd wake up in the morning and there he was.
Jeff called him Uncle Mike. We call him Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he planned America's key battle for civil rights in this house behind the wall.
Mom and Dad were very happy to provide a private, secret residence for him where he could have meetings and negotiations.
When King and other ministers organized boycotts of segregated businesses, Birmingham police arrested him. And white ministers wrote this letter to the newspaper urging King to leave town.
Dr. King said, "How could men of the cloth not understand the plight of the Negro.
Willie Pearl Mackey King was Dr. King's personal secretary. As Dr. King wrote his response to the white ministers from jail, he smuggled it in tiny pieces to her.
How did you read his writing, and how did you know which piece came first?
It was not easy. He wrote on toilet tissue, not Sherman, it was the jailhouse toilet tissue. He wrote on the edge of the newspaper. You'd move it around just like a puzzle and see if this part fit here, if that part fit there. Oh, okay, that's what he's saying.
He stated he was in Birmingham because injustice was there, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. His letter became the driving force for civil disobedience. When he got out of jail, he led hundreds of students from Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church for peaceful protests.
We were nonviolent. Bull Connor was violent.
Come on back now.
Bull Connor responded first by sending them on buses to jail. And then blasting them with fire hoses and attacking them with dogs.
At one time, we even bought a couple of boxes of dog whistles to pass out to the marchers so we could confuse the dogs when they would be sicked off on us to bite us, you know.
The images played across the nation. King pressured the president to respond.
And the telephone rings in the kitchen, and it's the White House calling. And they ask, is Dr. King there? And I said, yes. And he said, well, can I speak to him? So I went into the living room, and I said, Uncle Mike, phone in the kitchen, it's the White House. So he came back, and his response was, hello, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. President. Hello, Mr. Attorney General. I'm glad you called. No, sir, I'm sorry. We're not going to call off the demonstrations. No, we're not going to call off the mass meetings. No, we're not going to call off the boycotts. And I want the public to know that you support Bull Connor and you support George Wallace and segregation and inequality. And we're going to continue the demonstrations until you do something about it.
He listened very sympathetically, and we had a most fruitful and rewarding discussion together.
The White House stepped up, Birmingham police stepped back.
And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
The barriers of segregation continued to crumble.
We shall overcome someday.
After the Battle of Birmingham, Dr. King and many others led the March on Washington.
We shall overcome.
King was now facing constant death threats when he gave his most famous speech.
The I Have a Dream speech is a goodbye speech. He's saying goodbye.
1 month later, the Klan bombed 16th Street Baptist Church. They murdered 4 girls.
I heard the horrific noise, boom, and it sounded like the building was swaying.
Barbara Cross still mourns. She was the pastor's daughter. The Klan killed her best friend, Addie Mae Collins, in the attack.
I gave her my wallet. I said, see you in a little while. Students asked me, Miss Cross, what did you have any parting words for her when you saw her? I said, I guess I was telling her goodbye and I didn't know it.
It shocked the nation and helped push Congress to pass a Civil Rights Act.
Let us lay aside irrelevant differences and make our nation whole.
In Birmingham, we see the monuments to the struggle, and those who won it say we as students must now break the barriers that still remain.
Through all the violence, did you ever regret becoming a freedom rider?
No. I mean, you're going to die for something. If you can take something we did and use it to inspire you and give you ideas for what you can do, that's what matters.